Shortly after getting into wrestling in April of 2008, I was at my local Blockbuster. Remember those video rental stores, Blockbuster, Hollywood Video, and I think that's what it was, Hollywood Video, not Blockbuster. Tommy K's was the thing in the Connecticut, in the state of Connecticut when I was a kid. I don't know if you guys had that, but I did when I was a kid, and that eventually went out, and I think in '08. And Blockbuster was there as well. I only went there a few times. But Hollywood Video was a place that I always used to go to rent my videos, especially like '07, '08, '09, before it closed down in 2010. But shortly after getting into wrestling in April of 2008, about a month later, I was at Hollywood Video. And at the time, you can rent video games, obviously movies, but we used to rent video games. And before any of the new games came out that we really, really wanted, we tried them out at Hollywood Video to see if we liked them, and then we would buy them. So we were there about in May 2008, just a month after I got into wrestling. I saw the video game SmackDown versus Raw 2008. I didn't know it was, like 6 months old at this point, but I was still really intrigued. Brought it home for Memorial Day weekend. We had that Monday off, so I was able to play it on that Monday as well. Really, really enjoyed it. It was a great game at the time. Looking back on it, it was shit. Let me put this in perspective, because at the time, I'm an active Wii player, and I know it's not the most masculine thing in the world, but we had a Wii dating back to December of 2007. I've never been a huge Xbox guy, never been a huge PlayStation guy or whatever else, DSs or whatever. I used to have Game Boy Color and shit when I was a kid, but I used to just play Wii most of the time. I don't play video games much nowadays, and I'll get to that in a minute, but whatever game I would usually get, back in the day, it would be on the Wii. So I rented the SmackDown vs. Raw 2008 game for the Wii, played some exhibition matches with my brother, really, really fun time, and I thought it was the greatest thing ever. So it was like less than maybe 2 weeks later that I ended up getting the game for the Wii for my birthday on June 2nd, so I played that forever. I played it for the entire summer, thought it was great, did the storylines, and all that kind of stuff. Just kind of talking about it makes me want to go back and play it because it was so much fun. Looking back on it, it was the shittiest game I think we ever had for the Wii, because the difference, '08 in general, in my opinion, was not a great game, and I'll get into the specifics of that in a second, but the main difference between the Wii version, the PS2 version, the Xbox version, that the Wii version, this was the very first time that a SmackDown vs. Raw game had come out for the Wii. '07 didn't come out for the Wii, and Wii was still relatively new at the time, so this is the first game that included it. I think this is also the first game that had ECW in it, too, but that's besides the point. But, so we got the game for the Wii. They're still kind of working out the kinks, and the only 5 matches, if you go to exhibition mode on the Wii for SVR '08, the only 5 matches they have available are single, tag team, triple threat, and I think a knockout match or something stupid like that, where if you get your opponent's health bar to 0 and you just punch him or something, it's over. And I always thought that was a legitimate match for the longest time. I always thought that was a KO match, I think is what it was called. I always thought for the longest time that was a legitimate thing. A KO match was a real match type, and it's not. There might have been one more. I know, maybe a hardcore match. Maybe maybe that's what it was. But even for, and when you did a tag team match in that game, you couldn't even fucking leave the ring. The game was so limited in what you could do for the Wii. It's like, going back on it was so shitty. And it didn't have a GM mode either, and I rented the game for one reason or another a couple months after this for the PS2, and it was even better for that game because you could do a lot more, and I saw it, and I'm like, holy shit, this is awesome, because you could do Hell in a Cell, TLC, all this awesome stuff. And '08 had a good roster. It was the introduction of CM Punk. They had MVP in that game, a number of others. So whenever I go back to play '08, and I usually don't nowadays, but whenever it is, I played a couple years ago to play the GM mode on the PS2 version. I ended up buying the PS2 '08 version I think in 2010 or 2011, something like that. But I usually just play it for GM mode. And GM mode even in that game was shitty because you have the ECW brand in there. It's not great. '07, in my opinion, is the greatest game ever for GM mode. And '06 is good too, but you can turn money off, and I know I'm a cheater, but it makes it that much harder. And Christian and Jericho are in that game too, and they're not in '07, so that's a great game to play for GM mode as well. GM mode, in my opinion, and let's just kind of get into the core of the video here, but was my favorite thing and is my favorite thing to this day. General Manager mode, and I've done Wrestle Rant videos on this in the past, and go back and check those out, but GM mode is amazing. It allows you to pay your superstars. It's like a real-life play mode of what would happen in reality between the two brands. And, of course, there's no two brands anymore, so the thing is pretty pointless. But just the concept of it I thought was great. The roster in '07 was really, really good. They had a lot of good wrestlers, a lot of good legends. And I still play it to this day. I mean, even as the filming of this video, I just played F-Zero 07 GM mode last night. People see me tweet about it all the time. I post it on Facebook. I post videos here on the channel. A number of videos of me doing commentary for the last couple of years. I've done that. So it's a really, really fun time. I always enjoy doing it. The roster never gets old. You just turn people heel face, switch the brands, and I play both Raw and SmackDown. I'm the GM of both shows, so it makes it that much more fun. I mean, it takes longer, but I record all the results and stuff like that, and I don't play it all the time. I usually if I do play it, it's usually on the weekends, especially during the school year, because I don't have time during the week. And even when it's on the weekends, I have other stuff I have to do, so I usually play it every few weeks, once a month, even if that. So, but even still, GM mode was awesome. Because after I got 08, got 09. 09 was good because 09 focused on tag teams. And I've gotten, by the way, for the record, I've gotten all these games for the Wii. 09 was pretty good. I loved it because it was such a step up from 08 that in the sense that you could do so many more matches in exposition mode. Something like that. I think I botched that, but never mind. But, even still, I loved 09 because there's so many things you could do. 2010, 2011, I don't really remember all that much about. 2010, I think, was a joke. 2011 wasn't all that bad, but just the fact that I can't remember anything about them at all kind of speaks volumes. But those matches were always fun, and I wouldn't play them all the time. Usually, like anyone would, I used to play the games like for the first few months when they came out, did all the storylines, unlocked all the people, unlocked all the costumes and stuff like that. And then I wouldn't really play all that much because I didn't really have the time. WWE 12 I thought was great. It was one of the most highly anticipated games in quite some time, and it was at the time the best game since No Mercy. No Mercy is amazing. I'll get to that in a minute. And WWE 13 was even better than WWE 12. It focused on the Attitude Era. I thought that was a great game. And WWE 14, 2K14 I should say, was even better than all of these games combined. I mean, it gets better every single year. Since WWE 12, it's gotten better. I mean, 13 was better than 12, 14 is better than 13, and here's hoping 15 is even better than 14. So I love all those games, and 14 I think I've played the least, if only because they don't release the games for the Wii anymore, so I was forced to get it to the Xbox. And like I said before, I don't play Xbox all that much. I'm not an avid Xbox guy. But I got the game for Christmas. I played it for a few played it for a few weeks when I was home over Christmas break. But since I've come back up to college and the Xbox wasn't really mine, it belonged to my brother, that I wasn't able to play because I don't have an Xbox here up at college. I only have the PS2 and the Wii. So I played it, I think, maybe once or twice when I went home for spring break. But aside from that, I really haven't played it at all. I think it was Easter weekend, actually, that I played it. But aside from that, I really haven't played 2K14 at all. I still haven't even finished the WrestleMania mode. I know the game came out in, like, fucking October, but I still got to go back and do that when I get home in just a couple of weeks. But even still, though, I mentioned No Mercy before. No Mercy is amazing. If you don't own a Nintendo 64, go back and get it. I mean, just in general, the Nintendo 64 was the shit. It was the fucking shit. It was amazing. N64, better than any system I've ever played, in my opinion. So fantastic. Mario 64, Mario Kart, so many games on there, including No Mercy, as well as WCW versus NWO Revenge. And that was the first wrestling game I ever played. Now, this is long before I ever got into wrestling, dating back to maybe when I was a kid, like 6, 7, 8 years old, at my grandmother's house. And I used to own an N64, but it obviously broke down when we got like the GameCube and stuff, and we played that most of the time. But my grandmother in her basement had an N64 that one of my cousins donated to her to have in her basement. So I would play it whenever we were over there with my brothers and whatever. And we would play WCW versus NWO. And like I said before, I wasn't even a wrestling fan at the time. I just played it because it was so much fun. I always used to play as these masked men. I had no idea who any of the guys were, with the exception of maybe like Hulk Hogan, who was even my favorite wrestler long before I even became a wrestling fan. But even still, though, I thought it was great. It was so much fun. I used to play it all the time. And when I got into wrestling in 08, I went back and looked at the roster and recognized all these names. And as more time passes, I know who more the people are. Because, now I'm exposed to the 90s and WCW and blah, 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 blah. So I know what a lot of the people were in that game. But even still, that game was amazing. And then shortly after I got into wrestling and I saw that they had another wrestling game at that house, at my grandmother's house, I started playing that, and that was No Mercy. No Mercy 64 for the N64 was, I think, released in maybe 99 or 2000, something along those lines. It obviously came out during the Attitude Era. There's so many people that you can play as. You can play as fucking Jim Ross, Michael Cole, Earl Hebner, Fabulous Moolah. They have Shawn Michaels as an unlockable, Big Show, and create your own wrestler like the Cause before they were Cause. There's storyline mode, and I never do the story mode. I just do exhibition with my brother all the time because it's so much fun. We do 40-man Royal Rumbles all the time, triple threats. They got the European Championship in that game. They got so many aspects of that game that make it so much fun. I used to play as Kane all the time. I used to play as Christian, Edge, Matt Hardy. There's so many guys in that game to play as that I love. That game's great. There was an N64 up here at school for a few weeks. It's not here anymore, and they had one of the NWO Revenge games. It wasn't the Revenge, I think it was the original one. But even still, and I did get an N64. I got it working in my house at one point, so we used to play WCW versus NWO with No Mercy. I think it's a treat that I usually just play it when I go over to my grandmother's house every few months or so, because if I had it, it would kind of take away from it being so special to me. But even so, that was a great game. So if you don't have that, go back and play that. That's amazing. If you have an N64, and even if you don't, go back and buy one because they're priceless. An absolute vintage system. But even so, going back to the task at hand here, the SVR games I thought were all great. 08 in retrospect was shit, but with it being the first game that I ever owned, about 6 years ago this month, and almost to the day that I rented it for the very first time on Memorial Day weekend of 2008, and I think it was right after I went to the Indiana Jones movie, the new one that was released that year, the fourth movie. I rented the game, played it all that weekend, thought it was a blast. It wasn't until like a couple months later that I realized that it was completely different from the PS2 version, that I finally figured out how to unlock all the legends and whatever. But even so, that's a great game. You know, the video games, I'm not a huge video game guy. I'm not a huge Call of Duty guy or modern that's the same thing, Modern Warfare, Halo, whatever else there is, Gears of War, all the other games out there. You know, I used to see people or have people asking me in high school, even to this day, like, do you play this? Do you play that? You should play this. With all the writing and stuff that I do and other stuff that I do outside of, like, the wrestling world, other projects that I have going on, the website, the radio show, the YouTube channel, stuff like this, I don't have time to play all that much video games. Like I said before, I usually just play SVR 07 GM mode on the weekends, like once a month or so when I have the time. But aside from that, though, I don't play the video games all that much. So that being said, though, I do love playing SVR 07 GMO specifically. The gameplay is okay too, but GM mode is amazing. So I don't really have the time, and if there's any one game that I have to play, and I mean, I will play another game from time to time on the Wii, the PS2, PS3, Xbox, because I do have an Xbox 360. It's not really mine per se, but it is my brother's, and I play it when I'm home sometimes. But just the wrestling games are where it's at. They're the classics. So whatever it may be, whatever is your forte, whether it be WCW versus NWO Revenge, whether it's No Mercy, SVR 08, any of the SmackDown versus Raw games, whether it be any of the WWE 12, 13, 2K14 games. If there's any one game I'm going to be playing on a game system, it has to be SmackDown versus Raw.